저희 이제 이번 세션은 킬링 더 워크 몬스터라는 주제로 발표를 하는데 아마 제목만 봤을 때는 이제 아마 감이 안 잡히실 겁니다. 근데 이게 이제 데스크립션 여러분들 이제 받으신 그 내용을 보면은 굉장히 재밌는 세션이에요. 기술적으로 문의 그 지형에 안기는 움직임을 구현하는 방법에 대해서 발표를 해주실 텐데요. 저도 굉장히 관심 있게 보고 있습니다. 저도 굉장히 기대가 되는 세션이고요. 자, 그래서 킬링 더 워크 몬스터라는 주제로 어레이 로켓사의 케이시 무레토리 대표님을 모시겠습니다. 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다.
This is Firewatch. It's a very popular game, came out in 2016, about the same time as the game that I'm going to talk about today, which is The Witness. And in this game, the player walks around the environment and tries to interact with all of the story elements and things in the game. In this case, the player is trying to go up these stairs. And unfortunately, the player can't go up the stairs. The player, of course, doesn't know why, and possibly even the game developer doesn't know why, but some kind of bug has happened here. And this isn't a shipping game. This is sort of a bug that happens often, and of course it ruins the player's experience because now they can't get to the next thing that they were trying to do in the game, and the game play kind of stops. This happens a lot in, say, for example, Firewatch. You can fall off of a ledge here and land in a ravine, and it turns out that you're not supposed to be able to fall off that ledge. So if you walk down the ravine, you end up outside of the map and looking at things that aren't finished. Similarly, you can go to places where the level designer has attempted to prevent movement, such as outside this area of the map, but if you squeeze through things like this, the boulder and the tree there, you can get outside the map again. And also, in addition to being able to get places you're not supposed to go, you can also get stuck inside geometry. In this case, the player is stuck inside a rock. They're trying to get themselves out. They eventually do get themselves out, only to find that they are then stuck in another piece of geometry that they can't get out of, again stopping the player from being able to actually play the game as they intended to. Now, there's also some things that maybe look like more esoteric bugs, like in this case, the player can't get through what appears to be an invisible wall, and so on and so forth. There's literally hundreds of these in most games that you might play, and you probably all experience them at some point. Now, I don't want to pick on Firewatch because this is actually in almost every game. So, for example, maybe instead of Firewatch, you're currently gone home, and you get stuck inside a door, and you can't move, and again, that ends your ability to play the game because you can't get unstuck from the door, so you have to restore saving. Maybe you're playing Everyone's Gone to the Rapture, and you will not be going to the Rapture because you fall through the grass and end up underneath the world, looking back up at it. Maybe you play Vanishing of Ethan Carter, and instead of Ethan Carter, the floor vanishes, and you end up underneath the world again. Or maybe you're playing Ether 1, which is another similar style game, and you fall off a cliff into some geometry, only to then fall off out of the world entirely. Maybe this is why it's called Ether 1, I don't know. But anyway, this is a very common bug. It's in almost every game. And I don't want to pick on indie games because they're far from the only games that have this property. I also don't want to pick on walking simulators because you can actually see these bugs in almost everything. In AAA titles like Assassin's Creed or your PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, big games oftentimes have these problems as well, and players are very familiar with them. The reason I showed those examples is because all of those games are games where all the player has to do is move around. They're very simple in comparison to some of the more complex things, like I mentioned in PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. There you have to be able to drive cars and jump off of railings and do all these fancy things, whereas in a lot of these games, and the game I'm going to talk about today, which is The Witness, you don't have to do those things. You really only have to move around. Now, I came on to The Witness to try and solve this problem specifically. It's what I was going to do on that project. And the first thing that I tried doing on The Witness to try to start to tackle these kinds of bugs was I made a system that you can see working here that tries to find everywhere that the player can get from a known starting point. And you can see the white lines are kind of where the phantom little player testing thing is trying to explore. This was not a particularly good solution, so I eventually switched to one that does sort of flood filling of an area. And you can see that the initial ones had some problems around boundaries where it would oversample. You can see that happening here. But then finally we got one, and it only took a couple weeks. It was pretty simple to get to this point. Here's one that just kind of looks out from an area and pretty cleanly tells you what you can and cannot go to as a player. Now, we thought this was pretty interesting, and we were like, we should probably write this up, so I posted an article about it in December 2016. This was a very popular article that a lot of people read, and I got lots of feedback from it. But up until today, I haven't talked about the fact that actually we never used this system in the game at all. It was called Walk Monster, and it was our first attempt at something like that. After working on this problem for several months, after what you just saw there, we actually came up with solutions that are much, much better, and this is a talk about what those solutions are. So Walk Monster is now officially dead, but we have much better things, and so let's talk about what they are. So the first thing that you want to think about with a problem like this is if you have these kinds of bugs, you want to ask where they come from. Because some of the places that they come from may be very difficult to fix, and we'll talk about those at the end of the talk, but some of them may actually be fixable by technology, meaning we may be able to mathematically specify things that allow these bugs to be banished for good, and it does not require testing to find them. Now, the first property of a walk system that will make this true is a property called reversibility. And what it means is that if you can get from A to B, you can get back from B to A. It's a surprisingly simple thing to say, but almost no game's walk system guarantees this. In fact, as far as I know, we're the only one. In addition to that, you want to know that if you break a motion up into smaller pieces, it will still work. If I get from B back to A in one big step, I should be able to get it back there in little steps. So the player's speed, direction, location, none of these things should be particularly relevant as to whether or not they can get from someplace to someplace else and then back. Now, again, it's an easy thing to say, but it's actually an incredibly difficult thing to really put your finger on because most systems that games use for physics cannot supply this guarantee. For example, as you see on the left side of the screen here, if your system ever employs gravity in any way, you can easily create a system that causes a player to be able to get somewhere that they can't get back from. In this case, they may fall off of a cliff or even a moderately sized object. They may not be able to get back up. So you need some way of thinking about that problem constructively. Similarly, you may have problems where things like speed or angle of player motion create specific differences when moving through things like very small areas. So for example, on the right side of the screen, you can see where I'm coming from A or I'm coming from B. It may make a difference to the physics system whether I can fit through the very narrow space in between the ceiling and the floor. Okay, so again, very difficult reversibility. Another thing that is sort of less about mathematical guarantees and more about design is visualization. One thing that most walk systems also can't do is tell you where the player can and cannot go for real without testing, meaning a provably a visualization that shows you exactly where they can walk. So for example, if I want to know if I can get from A to B, the designer needs to be able to see it, and they need to be able to see whether a gap allows the player to move through it or not. Because otherwise they're going to be unable to actually author levels that have the correct physical structure for not having bugs. Okay, now this all gets compounded by an even harder aspect of the problem, which is that usually the data we get is not very good. On the screen right now you can see a typical walk mesh in the witness. This is just a bunch of triangles stacked on top of each other, and you can see the green outlines of the triangles. These are the places level designers have said players can quote-unquote walk. And you can see that it doesn't really make any sense. It's just thrown together, and it hopes that the physics system will make sense of it. This is a very difficult problem that you need to solve somehow. Now, in addition to things like saying this is where the player can walk, this is where they can't, and please make sense of it, there's also another thing that game designers often have a tool to do, and we have this in the witness as well, which is to place special purpose things that prevent the player from moving in particular ways. So here you see overlaid onto the map of the witness all of the blocking regions that level designers placed, and these are placed specifically to try to create a better gameplay experience. They're placed to try and say, here's where it feels natural for the player to stop when they walk up to this cliff, here's where it feels natural for the player to go on this walkway, and so on. And so in addition, we have to account for these sort of blockers that prevent motion over surfaces that the designer has previously told us the player could walk. Okay, now this is a very difficult problem, and I'm not going to go too into detail on the technical aspects of exactly how you solve it, but I am going to walk through how it works in general so you get a basic idea of how to solve a problem like this when you start to actually code the solution to it. The first thing you need to do when tackling a really hard CSG problem, which is what this type of problem is you have to start finding ways of making your movement, the actual way that you're going to move, be structured in a way that actually allows you to get the things you want to get out of it. So there's actually many ways that you can do player motion. And most of the time in games, we only really think about one of those ways, sometimes two of those ways, but there's actually a third way of doing it. So that's what I'm going to sort of lay out for you in a second here. First, let me summarize the goals that I just laid out, and we'll see how these movement mechanisms sort of fall in line. So first, we don't really want there to be any pre-computation. Now, on the witness, the reason we didn't want pre-computation was because we already had a lot of pre-computation for light maps, level of detail, this sort of thing. And so we wanted to make sure that we didn't add unnecessary steps to the process. Furthermore, we don't want level designers to have to wait to see the results of changes they make to the walkable regions. We'd like them to get that right away. Number two, we want guaranteed reversibility. That was the property I just talked about. We want to be able to say mathematically that this system can't fail at its lowest level. Number three, we want that visualizability, show us where the player can and cannot get. And then much to my ultimate despondence and sadness, number four is that all of these things have to run in 1 millisecond on a PlayStation 4 class CPU. That is not what I would like to hear, but that is just what we had to do on the witness in order to hit 60 frames a second on the PS4. So this is what we're looking for. Now let's talk about how players can move, how a physics system can handle the motion of the player. So the typical thing you see in almost all games physics systems is that it's just a simple, line, if you will, that you extrapolate along. The player is standing in some place, they impart some momentum, they take a step, they do something, and we just look along the line they wanted to walk, and we see whether or not they're going to hit anything. And if they do hit something, we try to find where they hit it. So if you look on the left side of this diagram, this is what I call searching in time. It's a solution that is based on looking through the time step that the player will move and trying to find the place where they hit an obstacle. So here, if you're moving from the bottom of the screen to the top, maybe I do a bisection scheme or something. I check the middle first. Then I check inside the obstacle. No, can't put it there. Then I check sort of a more happy medium position. I find a location, and that's where I put the player. Or maybe I solve this analytically and try to make a better first guess, etc., etc. Now, in tandem with schemes like this, or sometimes exclusively, there's another type of physics move, and I call this reverse search in space, or just a reverse P search. And what this involves is saying if the player moves from one place to another, then I'm going to look if the player cannot be physically where they end up because they're in a wall. I'm going to look for the closest place to put them. Now, both of those have severe drawbacks that we'll talk about in a second, but there is a third way. And what that is what I call forward search in space, or forward P. Now, this method just involves taking the player's current location, breaking the empty space in the world up into discrete regions, and then finding the closest place in those discrete regions where we can place the player without them going into the obstacle. It does not involve time, just space. Now, this excels where the other two types of movement fail for two reasons. One, it is not sensitive to any floating point precision issues. Now, I know that may be very technical for those of you who aren't programmers, but basically what it boils down to is because the world is broken up into fixed pieces with the same locations every time you do your testing, they aren't subject to the different floating point variability you'll have if you base things off the player's starting and ending locations. And similarly, another thing you can do is, we talked about visualization, and I want to get back. Well, if you have a way of breaking up empty space into cells that the player can stand in, you immediately have a perfect visualization of everywhere they can stand, because that is the definition of the algorithm. So, forward search in P is pretty much the ultimate physics movement type, in my opinion, but it is very, very difficult to achieve. So, what I'm going to talk about now is a brief sketch of the technology used to make this possible in the witness. And again, I'm going to keep the technical elements fairly limited, so if you have questions about this afterwards, please come up and talk to me. I'm happy to go into as much detail as you want. This is just a brief sketch. Alright, so we need to create a sort of empty space tiling, a way of breaking up all the places the player would go into fixed regions that we can understand and test. But remember, what we actually have is this ridiculously unorganized polygon mess that doesn't really have any coherent structure to it. And we also have all of these blocker things stacked on top of it that are supposed to make the player not be able to go certain places. So, just a reminder, this is what we're looking at. If you remember from the beginning of the talk, we're trying to make sense of all the stuff that the designer just piles on there, and we want it to work with as little designer help as possible. So in order to do something like this and to do it in a very short time step with no pre-computation, remember that's key. A lot of schemes would use pre-computation to do this. We didn't want to do that for a lot of reasons, we could avoid it. To do this with no pre-computation, what you have to do is approach the problem in building up the pieces you need from small, simple concepts to bigger ones. The first concept we have in the witness walk system is the concept of a pole. And a pole is a vertical point in the world that creates a line through space that we can look at where it touches each walkable triangle. In this case, I'm drawing X's on each walkable triangle at the place where the pole intersects them. This turns an unorganized group of triangles into a very simple thing to reason about, a line with some points on it, which we can all think about much more easily. What we then do is process this, and the first step we use is to look at our model for the player. Like many games, we use a cylinder model for the player. The reason for a cylinder model is outside the scope of the talk, but it tends to make it feel better to move as a player if you're a cylinder instead of, say, a sphere or a box or something. And our player model has a couple things. It has radius, which we'll talk about later, but for right now, what we care about is that it has a height. And in the witness, we actually break the height up into two pieces, which we'll also talk about later. One is the leg height. That's what they could walk over using their legs, so it's like a part that doesn't really collide. And an effective height, which is the actual part of the player that's their upper body that has to fit through things. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can pre-process these poles. I'm going to draw the one for players if the player can crouch. But we actually don't do that in witness. We use the full height of the cylinder because the player can crouch. So the first thing we do is we take the pole, and we take the intersections of the triangles on the pole, and we project the height of the cylinder, or in this case, the effective height of the cylinder if your player can crouch. We project it over onto that line, and we say, look, any points that are effectively shadowed by a higher point are not eligible for the player to stand on. Because if they did stand on that point, they would hit their head on the next walkable surface above them. So this eliminates a whole bunch of complexity right off the bat. Now again, I said we're going to build up from simple concepts to bigger things. So now what we do is we take those poles, and we consider them as a group of four, laid out in a square pattern like you see here. We take all of that intersection that I just talked about, where you find where each pole intersects with your triangles. We do that for every pole in this quartile. I call this a walk cell. and it's basically the fundamental unit for building surfaces. Because we just have lines with points along them as a pole, you can't stand on a point. You have to stand on an actual surface and move around on it. So what we do is we find all the intersections for each of the poles with each of the triangles. And then, since we have ordered the poles, we know they're in a fixed square pattern, we can walk from the highest point that we find around the walk cell, connecting these points to make an actual standable piece of geometry, a triangle. Now you may ask why we do this when we already had triangles to begin with. And the reason is because we are trying to fuse and understand tons of unrelated, messy triangles and blockers together at runtime as a CSG operation. And this is the best way that we found to do it. So this creates what we call a walk ring. It's the fundamental piece of the witness's walk system, and it's the thing that the player can actually stand on. Now what you'll notice here is that one of the poles did not have any supporting walkable triangle under it. The part of the ring that faces that pole is what we call a walk edge, and that is a crucial thing that we will talk about on the next diagram. So that's the basis, and now we just have to look at what happens on those walk edges. Okay, so let's look at this problem from the top down, and imagine that we have a whole grid's worth of poles. So each one of the squares you see here is a top-down view of one of those cells I just showed you. If these are the walkable triangles that are input to the system, the first thing we need to do, like I said, is find out where each pole intersects each walkable triangle. And I'm going to circle those here. So these are the ones that are in, all the other ones are out. Then I look for every place that there's an in next to an out. Connect them by a line like that, just showing on the diagram there. I then find the intersection along each of those edges with the actual walkable surface. And that gives me an exact walk edge. Now, you can notice that that would truncate the corner if I literally did what I said, and that's not exactly what we do. I'm going to save exactly what we do for later on because it's kind of minutiae. So pretend I have a way of doing what I just drew there, because I do. Once I have this walk edge in place, I now know the edge of the walkable surface if the player didn't have a radius. But remember, the player does have a radius. So the player should never be able to get close enough to the walk edge to have their radius of the cylinder fall over it. But what we can do once we've organized our geometry this way is we can actually trivially pre-shrink it to account for that walk edge. So all I have to do is take the player radius and sweep it along the walk edge, eliminating all pole intersections that were in that fall inside that. And so that's what I'm doing here. I just sweep that cylinder around, I cross out the ones that match, and then that just gives me the exact same problem I just had. I find intersections along the edges, and now I have a pre-eroded walk surface that actually is literally where the player cylinder would stop if it was moving against those boundaries. This produces the final element of the witness walk system, which is this connected manifold of walk rings. And we actually call the system walk manifold for this reason, because it is a real manifold with real guarantees. Okay, so let's go into this manifold. Each of these a walk ring. I'm just magnifying what's on the previous drawing here. How do we use this to move the player? Well, we find the ring that they started on, and then we just look at where they asked to go. So wherever they would go if there was no obstruction, right? Then what we do is start on that first ring, wherever we found that they were standing, and we look at the connected rings to that ring. We walk outwards until we've done all the rings we can find, and on each ring, we find the closest point, and that's what I'm drawing here. The closest point on that ring to where the player wanted to go. And again, that gives us something that is constant and fixed in floating point. It doesn't change because each of these rings is in a fixed location in space that will be the same no matter how the player got there. At the end of this process, we just take whichever one of those points was closest, and that is the best we can do. That's the furthest the player can go. And that's the solution. let's look at this actually working in the witness. Here's the player walking in the central area of the witness, and what I'd like to do is focus on two parts of this. So if you look here, the purple line is a series of marks of all of the locations that the player was on every frame in that walkthrough. And if I focus on this part right here, I know it's a little bit hard to see the pink points, but don't worry, they'll get a little brighter in a second here. If we look at all of these white crosshairs, those are all the places that we found intersections with walkable triangles for those poles. And we search a wider range than the actual size of the player movement, because remember, we have to find edges of a walkable surface and a road inward, so we have to start bigger and go smaller. The green rings in here, those are the actual walk rings we found for this move. And then what we do is we walk through those rings to find the closest points. That is the cyan points that will show up here in 1 second. They're basically like each of the closest points on triangulations of those rings, and we just take the closest one of those. That is literally the system working. This isn't a diagram. This is the debug output of the witness system running with the actual UI that I used to debug it. Okay, so let's look at a slightly harder space, because this was just two flat triangles. It's very easy, and there's not much complexity here. So if we actually go to the stairs, this is a place where there's multiple walk surfaces, and you can see here we're gathering geometry. That's what some of those are, the green triangles or walk triangles. Here I'm rasterizing those poles, finding those pole intersections. You can see it stepping through each triangle to find them. I'm going to go over this in a little more detail in a second, so don't worry if it's kind of hard to see. This is just what our system actually looks like in practice. We then go through finding walk edges, and you can see those in red have been added kind of in the background there. And then we look at all of the points to classify them against those edges, and that's what those additional green points are. Finally, we find the walk range, which makes the green connected structure. And then again, we walk through looking at all the cyan points to find the one that was as far along the walk direction as we could find. Now let's take each of those just slowly so you can see it. Here's a triangle being rasterized into poles. You see how it hits in the two places. Now there's also walkable triangles on the bottom, and you can see those being rasterized there. That's the grass, because the player, there's actual walkable triangles they could walk down there. Here's it adding walk edges one at a time. You can see there's sort of upright wall, red sort of wall pieces we add to visualize where those walk edges go. So that's adding all of those into the system there as it finds them. Now it's testing those walk edges against all of the poles. Green means pass, meaning it found, it like tested it and said, yep, you can still stand there. The blocker doesn't affect it. And then finally, it just finds the rings, as we said before, and we'll see that happen one at a time. And then the cyan points, which are the closest points, we'll see those happen one at a time. You can just see it kind of walk through. So that's each step in isolation. Now, just to sort of clarify, because I know I've thrown a ton of stuff at you here, why does it never search anything on the bottom floor, right? I said there were walk points down there. Why did it only search the top? Well, there's three reasons. The first reason is because these are not connected. So remember, as it is searching, it starts where the player began, it starts on that ring, and searches only connected rings. There are no connections all the way down to the bottom in the region we're searching, so it simply can't get there. The second reason is blocking walk edges eliminate a bunch of those are the red edges. And then finally, if you look at the geometry that I showed early on as a motivator, like all of these things stacked on top of each other, that walk shadowing, where we project the cylinder onto the pole, eliminates tons of points. So those white points are in at the start, and then watch how many of them get red eliminated when you actually start looking at what gets shadowed by higher walkers. So you can see all those red points in there were all eliminated because you couldn't stand on them without hitting your head on a walkable surface above you. Okay, so one last time, here's a walk move that runs into a tree. Here's rasterizing the walkable points in white. Then we'll rasterize the blocking points of the tree in red. Those are things the level designers place that say you can't go through this tree. Finally, we generate the rings by looking at the places that were in and not out. And that produces this exact structure that shows exactly where in that region the player can stand. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a sketch of how the system works. I appreciate that I've left a lot of things out there because it's a very complex system and I can only cover so much. let me talk about some of the details here in terms of things you might care about in your game. First of all, the walk cylinder size makes a big difference. As you change the walk cylinder size, I'm drawing the walkable region here. You can see how it pushes the region out from the walls as it gets bigger and in as it gets smaller. Now this matters for small passageways. Remember this geometry I kind of put up at the beginning? This is what the level designer said you could walk on, and here's the walkable surface. As I change the cylinder size, what will happen is small passages become impassable if the player cylinder becomes too large, and you get closer to the edges as the player cylinder gets too small. So here I'm increasing that size. You can see exactly the size when you can no longer walk along that passage, and here's it pushing outwards as I make it smaller. Now you may think, let's just always keep it small. But the problem with that approach is that the near clip plane that you use to draw your geometry has to be inside the walk cylinder, or when the player walks, they can put their head into things. So here's me walking with a small cylinder. See how I can get right into the geometry? That just totally breaks the feeling of the physicality of the world, and it reminds you that it's just a game. So we never want that. So the player cylinder always has to be out further than the near clip plane, and that's very important. Finally, like I said, we could use the whole cylinder for collision, but we actually use the cylinder minus a leg height. If we were to actually use the whole cylinder like this, then small things like this wall would be impassable. You can see the red ring around it. You can't get around it. So here, as I move that leg height up, you can see how the wall becomes slowly more and more passable. And so we set this fairly high in the witness so that they wouldn't spend a lot of time bumping into things that a human can just walk over. Finally, the density with which you solve this, the grid density, is important. Here's me walking along the railing, and you slide smoothly along the railing because the geometry looks like that. But if I increase the density, you can see it creates a hard edge there. That hard edge will actually cause the player to stick. And the question is, well, where did that come from? Well, again, the level design geometry tends to be kind of thrown together. And as you can see here, I've drawn in red a blocking piece that a level designer has placed on the stairs. Hopefully you can see that line. And they place it in such a way that only as you get lower down the stairs is it actually high enough to block you. And they align it so it cuts into the stairs, which means that as you come down the stairs, there actually is literally a hard edge placed by the designers. But because we set the resolution of the walk solve very low, it artificially smooths out these edges, which is a good thing. We don't want our level designers to have to spend all their time cleaning up small problems when the tech can just do it for them. Now, all of this stuff that I just showed you in terms of the walkable regions, understanding it, visualizing it, again, is because of that goal of visualizability. We actually solve the exact walkable region and draw it and use it, like I said. This differs from most systems. On the left is what you get in most systems if you want to visualize walkable regions. You either get something pre-eroded sort of by the cylinder, but not really, or something that just goes straight up to walls and it isn't pre-eroded, and then the physics system takes care of the collisions. That's the typical way. In the witness, again, all of these things are solved exactly. So what you see is really what you get. And this has a lot of payoff for visualization, because it means the level designers don't have to guess, they just know. To show you the difference in practice, here is the uneroded surface, so it would go all the way out to the end of the railing, as you see here. And now I'm going to go back to that same viewpoint I just showed a second ago, and show you what happens when I turn it back on. You can see it kind of shrink in from that very outside place. Okay, now before I sort of go into the results of the system and how we think it did, I want to say one other thing, because this is a weird aspect of the algorithm. Like I said before, if you were to actually do this naively, this is a family, this system belongs to the family of what are called implicit surface tessellators. For those of you who know what that means. And when I was doing that connection up at the corner, I used the phrase not exactly, and I said I'd tell you later. Well, this is the later. When we would get a result like this, where you have 3 outsides and 1 inside, instead of just truncating the corner, what we do is add two synthetic edges on the two edges that have those intersections. We then find those intersections, giving us 2 points on each edge we can use to extrapolate what the edge that created the intersection probably looks like and find where those two intersect. That recovers exact corners in implicit surface tessellation, which is something, as far as I know, nobody does. But we had a really good reason to do it, so we figured out this algorithm for doing so. Okay. So, let's, and again, that dotted line, is what we would have gotten as an answer. And that's almost certainly never what things look like, because they usually, if they're intersecting an edge, are going through it in some other way. It's rare for it to be exactly that way. Okay, so let's look at the fourth prong that I mentioned I haven't talked anything about, and that is the 1 millisecond CPU cost on PlayStation 4. There's no way I can cover how we did this. I'm happy to talk about it in more detail with you later, but we had a very short time to do it. It was about a week's worth of work to do, so that's all we had. Because I was part-time on this project, I came back to do this optimization work. All I can really say about it in short order is that I had built very solid instrumentation for the system, and that was really the only way we were able to do it in such a short period of time. What you see on the screen now is our instrumentation. It runs in real time as you walk around, and it tells you absolutely everything about what's going on in the algorithm. The graph at the top are counts of inputs to the system and numbers of things generated by the system, such as the number of walk rings, the number of polls, those sorts of things. And at the bottom, you see graphs of time. So you can easily see just by color who is taking the most time. And since I'm intimately familiar with the algorithm, when I look at that graph, it can tell me where the time is being spent just as I walk around. So I don't have to guess about what is happening in various parts of the game, I just know. We also had a thing that I made on the PlayStation 4 that would capture all of our slow locations, remember them, and replay them automatically, so that every change I made to the system, we knew definitively, at every slow part of the game in terms of walk geometry, exactly how much of a difference that change made, which allowed us to quickly stop from going down optimization paths that weren't going to bear any fruit. Let me give one more recap of the algorithm. Again, I know that there's a lot of tech in there that I kind of brushed over, so let me just cover it one more time in a nice list. Step one is we take all of the walkable triangles in the entire section that we're looking at, and we turn them into intersections on poles. We call this rasterization because it looks a lot like rasterizing graphics. Number two is we add blockers for all of the walk edges that we find. Remember that sort of artificially moves the surface in that erosion that we want to account for the player cylinder radius. Number three is we rasterize all of the blockers, so we remove all of the pole intersections that you can build on or stand on. And those blockers come from two places, either the level designer placed blockers, like those fins that I showed, or the walk edge blockers. And four, we actually process the rings, we find the rings, we look at each one, we connect them together, we refine the edges of the rings to find the exact intersection points, and we look for the closest points in the ways that I described. Now, that fourth process there, that I break up into A, B, and C of the steps, really the A and B steps kind of happen twice in the algorithm. Because the A and B step needs to happen during step 2 as well to find the walkable edges. So this is only a sketch of exactly how it works. It sort of looks more like 1, 2, 2A, 2B, 3, 4, A, B, C. But you can roughly think of it as operating this way. Again, the actual algorithm has a bunch of complexity in it that I'm sort of condensing for time. All right, so now the question is, you do all this work, is it worth it? And I have a bunch of stuff to report about that. Let's start with the original system, Walk Monster, the one I showed at the beginning. This is how long Walk Monster takes. I'm time-lapsing it. You can see how slow it goes to get large regions of the game. And the accuracy, again, is only approximate. It is a probing algorithm. It just tries to get places and see if it can. And here's like what it looks like at edges, so it's kind of hard to even know like what does that edge really look like. But it's kind of sure that I can go through there, maybe, right? Here's walk manifold, the system we actually use that we ship with. This is in real time, no time lapse. It can actually show you the entire walk surface of the entire witness island in fairly, like under a minute. Like it hardly takes any time. And to do even a region as large as the one you see here, it's fairly quick. So at any time, a level designer can look at an entire walk map of an entire region, and this is not approximate, it's exact. So there's nothing in here that isn't rasterized exactly the way it will actually happen when the player walks through it. Now, it's not very easy to visualize all this stuff if it's just a giant mesh, so we have lots of ways of looking at it for the designers. Here I've switched into a mode which only shows the boundaries and hatch marks that point into the walkable section. So it's very easy to fly around and just kind of see where these boundaries are, if the boundaries are all you care about at that time, which typically it's mostly what you do care about when you're editing. Now, similarly, we can also extrude edges upwards, so you can see where all of the synthetic walls are, effectively. Again, these are not the inputs to the system, this is the output. This is actually where the player stops. No guesswork. Furthermore, if you're editing, we have a mode that actually shows you these updates in a small region in real time. What you see here is as the editor actually runs, so as the level designer moves geometry, they can literally see the walkable path change instantaneously, no delay. So you can see whether you can walk past something or not with no guesswork. It is exact always. We also have a multimodal system that allows them to see large changes on a delay, but small changes in real time, so they can work in this hybrid mode as well. Again, lots of tools here for level designers. For actually playtesting the game, and for designers who want to test a region, it also runs in real time in the game as you play. This is showing all of the places you can walk from your current location out to a certain distance. That's the white grid, and the walls are in red. You can also turn on a look at what the inputs to the system are, so you can see where they are. This is a really, really powerful tool. It means that when you are playtesting, you don't have to playtest blind. If you're looking for places that the player can walk out of the map, you don't have to try, you can just look. And you can immediately see whether a wall is continuous or not by looking at whether or not the white grid goes outside the region. This is real time, so when a player opens the door, you see a change before your eyes. And again, it's exact, not approximate. This leads to a funny thing. In the witness, a lot of people thought this was a bug. The fact that you could walk past, for example, this final panel. It's not a bug. John's design was that he wanted players to be able to skip the hardest panel in the series. And if you look here, it's easy to see why we would have known that was a bug if it was, because it's trivial to see that you can get across just from where you are, right? And if I play this back again, watch, you can see the instant that it does become walkable. Right there. So you know at any point while you are playing and testing where you can get and why. Now, in terms of how solid the underlying tech is, it's actually bulletproof as far as we know. This is me playing the game with a special debug key that allows me to move extraordinarily fast. This is not time-lapse, this is just me playing the game. And no matter how fast you go, you cannot break the system. It will never let you walk to a place that you can't walk. We've literally never found a way to break it. Now, unfortunately, never find a way to break walk manifold is not the same as never find a way to break the witness. Which brings me to the last part of this talk. What are the things we can't solve with this system? And we have some experience with that because we know what bugs happened in the shipping version of the witness that were not due to the system, because as far as we know, there weren't any. Okay, so we had 3 bugs that we know about. Maybe there are more that the players never reported, but we had 3. 2 of them were successfully mitigated by other aspects of the system. 1 of them was not. This is the first bug. It's that there's gameplay code bugs in the witness that allow you to interact with the panel and load a save game while you are interacting with it. The end result is that the light bridge underneath you is removed when you reload your save game, and the walk system cannot find anywhere to put you. Again, we have defense in depth for problems like these. The walk system simply puts you back at a known good location, so we don't break the player's save game and we don't break their experience in this case. We'd much rather not have this bug, but the fact that we had it and it didn't ruin the player's game is at least a little better than just ruining the entire playthrough. Okay, so there was a second kind of bug like this that actually did ruin the player's save game, and it was because I screwed up and allowed a change to the system that I should not have allowed. The original walk system did not allow the player to be moved if the streaming system that streams in content was incomplete. So if the region around you had not completely streamed in, it wouldn't allow you to move. It turns out that John wanted this to feel a little more fluid and not stop the player in case the streaming system stuttered. So we asked if it could allow you to move around the bounding volume of the things that were streamed out, which I reluctantly agreed to, not realizing that this actually introduces a streaming bug that's fairly subtle and happens almost never, but it did happen in at least one save game we know about. That was a change I never should have agreed to, and I think it was just because at that point in the project, being part-time, I'd kind of forgotten some of the reasons for those things. And so I kind of think in the future, what I should do is record why I made every decision, so that if someone asks me later, I can say no to things that I should say no to. Now finally, here's an example of a bug that I have no solution for. Those other two were ones that we mitigated, or could have mitigated. This one I have no idea how to solve, really. It turns out there's some geometry the level designers left in the witness that allow you to walk off the boat into nothing land. This is really bad because if the boat is still moving, it could leave you behind. And we try to mitigate bugs like this most of the time by using sort of those visualization techniques. And the fact that this is the only bug we know of that we ever had, I assume that means the visualization mostly worked, but hey, it didn't work here, so I don't know how to I don't know how to make a system that can guarantee that we would have found this bug. I've thought about how we might have found it, and the only thing I can really think of so far is that if we had been further along in the iOS version of the project, which involves tap to move and pathfinding, we could have used markers that have been placed in the world, in the witness for that purpose, to know, generally speaking, where level designers thought the player probably should be able to walk, and maybe produce automated searches that could alert them to large walkable regions that they never told us the player should ever really be in. So the next time around, that's my only real guess for how to attack that kind of bug. Now, all that being said, there are other kind of bugs you can have. We just didn't happen to have these in the witness. There are logic bugs of the kind the game designer sets something up where if the player, flips this switch, it brings sort of some kind of a wall down that closes the player into an area, and there's no corresponding switch to get them out, let's say. So these are gameplay logic bugs, and if we were going to do another project like this, and I was involved in doing the bulletproofing system again, since I think our walk manifold system solves the floating point problems, it solves the lower end of the problem, and the visualization system solves the level design knowledge problem, I think the next thing to attack is the game logic, and to start saying, how do we start modeling those pieces? Things like, can you recall an elevator? Or even maybe if I was really ambitious, how do we find that boat bug that is by far the hardest bug, I think, to find that we had in the witness, and that I don't have a solution for. I know I glossed over a lot of things there. I'm happy to take any questions at a time, but I suspect we probably don't. So if you see me around and have a question about the system, please feel free to ask. I'm happy to go into detail about any other aspect of it. Thanks so much for listening.
네, 굉장히 열정적으로 강의해 주셨죠? 네, 저도 옆에서 보는데 큰 감명을 받았습니다. 저희 다음 세션 하기 전에 질문 하나만 듣고 네, 넘어갈까 합니다. 혹시 질문 있으시면은 네, 가장 먼저 손 드신 네, 한국어로 질문 주실 예정이신가요?
Do you have any plans for shipping it at a marketplace like Unity or Unreal?
I don't have any plans for that, but that is largely probably due to my not knowing much about those marketplaces. If I thought there was a really reasonable, like, having done game technology that was licensed before, I used to work at Rad Game Tools. I know how much work goes into supporting tools like this and doing the sort of day-to-day work of handling customer problems. I just feel like that's a really big commitment to make if you're going to put a tool like this out. And so if there was a really big market for something like this, I could see doing that. But I just don't know enough about those markets to know whether it would be worth doing that in terms of the amount of time you would have to expend versus how much money you would actually make from the licensing. So, yeah, all I can really say there is I don't know enough about it to say.
Thank you.